Hunting by Stars. Chapter 41, Epilogue, Prologue, The Girl Who Would Be Loud, Rose. Night was peeling back from sky, revealing thinner layers and gauzy light as it went. Rose couldn't sleep. Out here, the grass swam with whistling insects, was pushed down by quiet paws. The sky was too big, too vast, too much space to get lost in. Nothing was holding her down except the weight of a boy's arm, the warmth of a boy's love, and those, too, could be too much. She slid out of French's sleeping embrace and crawled outside the circle. She stood and walked into the thick of the field, so riotous she could hear it working pulpy braids into the abandoned agriculture. In the distance, the bones of an old amusement park scratched the horizon with splintered loops and creaking chairs held together with climbing vines where the rust had broken them free. If she closed her eyes, she could hear the echoes of excited screams and old laughter caught up in the wind. There were no remnants of greasy popcorn, no cotton candy, no animal shit or off-brand cigarette smoke. The smells were gone, the people were gone, but the sounds, those lingered somewhere in between the open sky and the snaking grass. Sound has a way of living on and being noticed. When you are drawn forward, you say something is calling you. When you have a passion, you say it's a calling. Something was calling to Rose now, something under the grass, beaten into the ground, loosened by so many new roots. Or maybe something up in the stars, hanging like the ancestral portraits in the night gallery just above her head. When Rose was a girl, she wanted to dance, but her feet wouldn't cooperate, and her pride made her stand still. She'd wrap her mother's old fancy dance shawl around her shoulders in the comfort of her bedroom and pull the yoke on top, some strings loose so that when she moved, beads fell to the floor. She didn't watch herself in the mirror, because then she would remember she couldn't do this, she couldn't dance. What she could do was fight, so she did that instead, punching second cousins when they teased her for her curly hair, putting townies in headlocks when they called her names she didn't understand but knew were poison by the way they festered under her dark skin. They couldn't decide if they hated her more for being from the res or being black, or so they made weapons out of words, all the words they could find, and threw them at her. And now, even after all that, she still couldn't dance. So she kept fighting. Rose was a fighter, and sometimes that's nothing more than the choreography of survival. Rose wanted to be a jingle dress dancer, but she never asked for regalia. By the time she was 5, those dresses existed only in stories. Making noise drew attention, and attention brought in outsiders. So to be safe, to stay alive, the people had gone quiet, except for the stories. Eagle plumes fastened to the backs of their heads, small purses with tobacco offered in return for prayers, hundreds of silver cones hanging from the bias taps around bright material. Jingle dress dancers were the healers. They made the noise that brought the healing. The first one came from a dream and allowed the girl who wore it to overcome her own sickness with a sound like nothing else in the whole world. Rose wanted to make that noise, but instead she made the sound of a knuckle against a tooth, a fist connecting with a kidney, and the suck of breath being knocked out of the chest. Rose was a fighter, and sometimes that's nothing more than the choreography of want. She had never been to a powwow. She had never seen a real jingle dress, but she knew the pattern by heart. Her grandmother had taught it to her, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing out the lines with a finger through spilled sugar. People had different versions of where the dress first came from, but her grandma asserted it was from Treaty 3, her own territory. The skirt goes below the knees, and it's heavy because of all the jingles. Most people do 365, one for each day of a year. Hang them close together so they hit each other when you move. Boy, you could hear some of those dancers walking into a field from the fry truck, like shattered glass being put back together. Now the loudest sound was the earth uncurling and flexing into every space. Tree bark popped its seams from the sudden changes in weather. Weeds strangled the geometry of cultivated spaces overnight. Bees swarmed broken streets, made hives out of green-clotted houses, the wallpaper shot through with moss. Foxes traveled in covens, noses to the ground, throats safe from the wolves that slunk across barricaded highways like silent motorcycles. The moon was blocked by the flight of dark birds moving into the new territory. Not every fight was violence. Some fights were resistance. The earth was a fighter, and sometimes there's nothing more than the choreography of reclamation. Rose turned back to the camp and went to her backpack full of medical supplies and tinned food, a knife, and a small tarp to collect water. She was more grateful than ever that Nom had scavenged the pantry before they escaped the house in the woods. She'd reached into the front pocket and pulled out a small bundle. Then she made her way around the perimeter of sleeping bodies to the place where Wab and Ishkodi shared the only remaining blanket. The baby was sighing in her sleep. She didn't cry much, already attuned to the danger of that pitch. This soft exhalation, fringed in voice, was more useful, letting her mother rest swaddled in the certainty of her baby's steady breathing. Rose slunk forward, pulled the bundle from her pocket, and unwrapped the cloth. Minerva's jingles, the ones she'd carefully crafted from tin cans and discarded lids. Minerva, who hung in the night gallery beside all the other grandmothers now. Minerva, who had known that one day there would be someone in a dress that made a sound like nothing else in the world. Minerva, who had known that one day the people would be loud again. Rose rewrapped the handful of jingles, already dangerous with the potential, and tucked them in beside Ishkodi. They were hers now, and one day Rose would help her make the dress that would hold them. This child would make noise, like shattered glass being put back together, and they needed it, because a new cacophony was breaking in. It was just up ahead. Rose could feel it, cresting the audible edge of tomorrow. It was coming on dark wings, making shorter work of time and distance, and this would be the way they resisted. This would be the reclamation. This was the girl who would be loud. Ishkodi was a fighter, and sometimes that's nothing more than the choreography of being born, everything the ancestors ever dreamed of, and those ancestors, they never stopped dreaming.